Awesome. Well, thanks
I
for giving us some time here. We just watched the movie the other night and thumbs up. Everybody that we know that has been a part of like the talking of this has been very excited. So I
That's
know we've
cool.
got limited time, so I'm just going to dive into some key questions for you and
Anything you want.
feel
Anything
free
you
to elaborate as needed.
want. Thanks.
All right.
I'm glad you enjoyed it though, by the way.
It's a great little like thriller suspense movie. Which starts me off. Well, let's go into the questions. The plot is largely confined in a really, really small space. For directing, how is that to manage the actual cast and all of the camera work and things when it goes into editing?
Well, there's so many factors to consider that like people often wouldn't, you know. There's like a psychological effect on both me and Bill just feeling confined to that set, you know. Many times I'd be laying in like the back seat or something with an iPad on my chest. It's just me and him in this car, you know, and I said to him when we started making the movie, I was like, man, it's gonna be you and me, you know, like it's gonna be us in a car for the whole time. And but talking to him very quickly, I was like, I we could be locked in the car together and get along fantastically. So so there's sort of like that challenge, and then there's the challenge of like keeping it visually interesting. You know, I think that this genre, this subgenre of thriller, like, you know, the contained person stuck somewhere kind of movie tends to be limited on the cinematography because of the physical realities of the story they're telling. But my aim in this, one of my aims, was to um, break that mold and to not be restrained by it and to get to shoot one of these with crazy like to have some crazy cinematography and to really be unlimited and shoot inside a crammed little space in ways that have never been done before. And and yeah, so I'll give you one example of a technical challenge we faced. And you could just tell me how technical you want to get here. But to get so I wanted to shoot anamorphic lenses, right? As part of like having something that feels cinematic and stuff. Uh, and cinematic lenses typically cannot focus on a subject that's closer than 6 to 9 feet. So how do you put a how do you put an anamorphic lens on a camera in a car and have Bill be 9 feet away from it so that it can focus on him? Can't. So I mean, that's why I'm saying there's so many challenges to execute it. We had to have every lens that we use in the movie is either custom made or customized for this movie in one way or another.
Well, I'll add into that too as a viewer, as somebody watching the movie. I thought it was genius on also cutting to the perspective in the car from um, the multiple cameras placed, kind of that it was almost voyeuristic, but it made you feel like you were a spectator in a real crime, which was an awesome little thing. You've got these beautiful shots, and then the multi-screen shots of just the different angles of him being trapped in this car, which definitely added to the kind of claustrophobic feel that the movie has. So that's awesome of like digging into those different like the lenses and the angles.
You
Super
know,
thumbs up as a fan.
thank, by the way, thank you very much. And I appreciate you saying that. Like, I saw, you know, my social media feed for a while, you know, I'm using less and less social media, but my social media feed for a while things were getting into my algorithm. I think maybe because I was doing research for this movie, but that were like I was watching crime happen, real crimes, and I understand that my audience is is obviously also on social media and they're experiencing crime. That's how we know. That's how we know we're watching something bad happen. You know, if I scroll through and I suddenly see security camera footage of someone somewhere, you know, especially if they're in like a big hoodie and kind of like hiding or something, you know, like doing anything they can to obscure their face. Like I know a crime is happening, and so in order to ground the movie, it's a crazy concept. It's a silly, big, over the top concept. And my job, in my opinion, was to like bring it into reality and explore it in the most realistic way possible. And I thought that shooting it that way would feel real.
Yeah, definitely grounded it for the viewer, which I loved. Well, that kind of leads into to like the actors. You were able to snag two of one of the most renowned horror actors. Um, how do you navigate those interactions, especially with Sir Anthony being off screen for a good portion of the movie and having this empathy that you give to the Eddie character as it progresses on, keeping that balance in that confined space, um, and directing the mood so you start to have empathy for both characters, whether you should or shouldn't. How do you manage that?
Yeah, I mean, uh, so yeah, listen, I felt really lucky. I was able to have in this movie, yeah, like beyond being two incredible horror actors, I truly believe they're two of the greatest living actors, that anyone could ever get. And so it was incredible to work with them and to see them work. But man, seeing them together was like a whole nother level. And I often felt like I was conducting, you know, eh, an insane orchestra, or like I was, like I was trying to control tornadoes that were smashing into each other. It was wild. The scene where the two of them are together, it was like, I think the three of us got so caught up in the scene. I think we like captured this little magical lightning in a bottle, but it felt, you felt it on the set, and the crew came over, and my wife's a costume designer in the movie. She works with me and everything I do, and she's a huge part of my creative process, and she's a huge part of everything, but a huge part of my creative process. And um and so she's on text chains with the crew going, "Oh my God, Pennywise and Hannibal are battling it out. Like, this, can't believe I'm in the room with this. I can't believe I'm watching this live." It felt like a real moment, yeah, I like.
There's those moments as a viewer too in all movies where you're in the story and you don't always get pulled into those moments in acting where like they are nailing this role. But there are scenes with both in the car towards the end of the plot that just facial expressions, like there's like sarcastic like eye like rolls from Hopkins, and then Skarsgård just with that like just drive of like what the hell is going on? Like the entire story plays out on their faces in those scenes, and you're just like, damn, they're killing it as usual.
They're so good. They're so good. I mean, I've now done a lot of interviews for the movie, and so a theme that I keep hearing, a theme that I keep hearing is like that. This could be Bill's best performance so far. Like and someone says that to me, and I'm like, okay, it's not my place to judge, But when I was sitting on set watching him, I was like, this is like my jaw was wide, and I'd go in, he'd be like, "How was that?" And I'm like, "Pretty good."
Well, some of the best characters are the characters that you shouldn't like that you end up liking. That's like my theory with things. And you're introduced to Eddie early in the film, and there's something off, he's kind of a mess up, as he progresses, but there is such a realistic like just struggle with him that great character development in that regard.
Thanks. I'm always attracted to like imperfect characters. Like, I love that Eddie. And by the way, Bill pulls, so much about Bill and his charisma, but he's this shifty guy. He's not a great dad at the start of the movie. He's a thief. He's hustling his friends for money. and you still love him and root for him. And for a portion of the movie, William has a person like basically in a cage and is like in ways torturing him, and you still relate to him, and you still at times are like, ah, this guy's got some points. The guy with the human being in a cage has some really good points. And so like I love I love challenging people's perceptions because it's so easy these days when everyone's just headline obsessed to make everyone a flat two-dimensional character, not just in movies but in life. That's a bad person. That's a good person. That's a bad person. Oh, that person, and the truth is so much more complicated than that. Like bad people do great things and great people do bad things, and like it just that's the real world, and that's so much more interesting than the previous.
The beauty of the grays between the black and the white, right?
Yeah.
Well, another character in the film too is the car itself. Um, do you view that as a separate character, or is it just the tool? Is it just William's tool at that point?
I did at times think of him as or think of him. Well, I guess then yes, because I just applied a gender to it. I did at times think of the car as a third castmate in a way, but I also just thought of it as like a dynamic, like the way I can't approached it really was there are limited things in the movie. So in order to keep it interesting, instead of relying on, oh, okay, we'll keep throwing new things at you to keep you interested. I had to keep adding layers of depth to the few things I had, or surprises to discover about the few things or people that I had in the movie. And so, so that's sort of how I approach the car, is like something that as you go and you discover more and more about the circumstance that he's found himself in, how dangerous this is, how thought out this is. And the same thing with the characters, you meet them where they are and you have an expectation of them. We get a little further and we learn more about who they really are. And then you get further and you learn more about who they are. And then even when Eddie discovers, when Eddie makes the change in his life, it's from discovering that his the thing that he believed about himself is bullshit. It's just to make himself feel better about his own personal insecurities and his behavior and stuff like that. And so the goal is to just keep adding more and more layers to discover about the few elements that I could have in the movie.
Well, and that's a great point as well, is there is a social umbrella that this sits under with just the obnoxious amount of wealth that William's character has to make this car. And a note that this car might have been used before. And then the absolute poverty of Eddie. And they're both doing what they can with the excess or the limited resources. Um, it becomes an interesting struggle of, does the rich win or the poor win? And that element doesn't, it's in there and it's that little whisper throughout the story, but it becomes more of the character and not so much of that social overtaking, which I really appreciated. I thought that was a really, really cool way of going about an issue that is kind of in those headlines and very much talked about on social media, which brought it back to into that almost voyeuristic feeling of the movie.
Look, it was very deliberate to practice some sense of restraint on the movie, because the thing that I was the goal was to not make a political film, but if you're going to have characters with dimension who exist in the world 2025, it's in, politics have infected every aspect of everyone's life. It's in everything everywhere, and so it's impossible to make a character with dimension and depth and not have some understanding of like where they are politically. And so I didn't want to put my finger on and tip the scale because my goal with this was not to convince you of a political thing or this or that. My goal was to show you what it like to have a moral conversation with everyone just about how what it feels like to live in this time and how can you know this generation who came up this way and this generation who came up this way and this people who have so much and people who have so little, they all have to exist in this space. And how is that possible? And how, and how much people have grown to hate each other. So I think yeah, that, so that's the goal was to really tell a moral tale.
Yeah, very relatable too, I think, with what people see out there. Um, Another question I had for you too is with partnering with the Avenue Films team, is did you have full creative control in making this movie, or was it more a collaborative like partnership between the studios and yourself?
So okay, great question. You're the first person that's asked me that question, and this is the first question I've had about the Avenue at all. So I always appreciate like a new question. Um, um, and so the Avenue is a just distribution company that came on after the movie was made and locked in, and they have been doing an incredible job. Like I think that independent film is having a moment. I think that if I ever see Sean Baker anywhere, I'm going to introduce myself and then I'm going to give him a huge hug. But this was an independent film. There was no studio. But in independent films, you have a different kind of master, and that's money. So while I had a lot of creative freedom, God knows if a studio made this movie, it wouldn't be anything like this. But I had to shoot the movie in 19 days as a result, and that's for people who don't know, that's an insanely fast amount of time. I think Nightbooks was 63 days or something like that, and Brightburn, which was a very tiny movie, was $6 million movie, was 25 days. So to shoot all of what you see in 19 days was was very hard, and that was the thing that was that and then just other financial stuff was the pushback, was the boundary. Whereas if I had a studio on board, they could throw cash at any problem they saw, but with that cash comes a lot of opinions and a lot of negotiating, what's best. And for this movie, I read this script and I said, okay, there's a version of this movie that is straight, that shoots it straight. It's like it's that thing, I go in, I have like this bold ideas and big ideas, and the studio, wants me to like play it straight down the middle, and then we kind of meet, and maybe there's a few moments where you can feel my voice, but in general, it's kind of shot the way it is. And I didn't think that movie would work at all in this space. I felt like right now people are hungry for bold voices that are doing different things, that are telling stories in different ways, that don't feel like what we've seen before. And so that was the aim to take this wild idea, this crazy idea, and to ground it in a reality, but make bold choices as a filmmaker and to distance myself from the previous studio thinking.
I love that. I'll leave off with one more question because I know you've got probably a busy schedule today. Um, with your portfolio is fabulous for the fact that it doesn't stick to a genre. Like you've got some bigger, like the superhero horror based of like Brightburn, or some of the YA stuff for Netflix. Each one though has this really cool, like as a horror fan, I don't know if I would like this. Locked is definitely more of a thriller than I
Yeah.
would say as horror, but there are terrifying moments of it. And even in some other stuff, there's those moments of like, yikes, what's going to happen next? Going forward, is there Is there a genre that you would want to do that goes away from that? Or do you like having that as kind of a signature thumbprint on some of your work?
You know, I love telling stories, and I think I look at genre different than most people do, and I think maybe that's in part why you see that happening, that in my work, like the sort of living outside of things, because to me, genre is a tool set to like tell a story, right? So like E.T. is a horror movie for most of the movie, for half the movie at least, because they're using the tool set of horror. They're grounding it in this subjective POV, this limited viewpoint, and it's experiential. It's about the the tension of what's going to happen next to this character in this moment. That's the horror. That's the horror thing. And if you look at Nightbooks and if you look at Brightburn, there's thriller sequences. I use some of the toolbox of the thriller genre to tell parts of those movies. And so and certainly there's a little bit of horror, but I think when people think of horror, what they think of is like an aesthetic or like or a vibe or like that it's scarier or so, that it was scary or dark or something, you know. Um, but so to me, I'm really drawn to things that are really hard. I wish I wasn't. I wish I could just like go make a straightforward like like this is a slam dunk, just shoot it and go. But they don't challenge my brain in that way. I like hearing something and going, how the hell are we going to do that? That sounds impossible. And then really breaking my back and my brain and my emotional stability to like try to figure out how to solve all those problems. And yeah, I mean, like, I just wrote a rom-com, like I'm open to so much. And to me, what I really like doing is telling stories. Like my favorite thing to do with my friends often is we like sit around, smoke a cigar, and tell stories to each other. And in a way, I feel like I get to do that with my fans. I'm like, come on, come into my backyard. I'm gonna tell you a story. I'm gonna tell it to you the way I would tell it to my friends. Like that's my voice. I'm telling you the story. And and yeah, I don't know. That's sort of like my favorite thing to do is like tell people stories. And so sometimes they can be hilarious, but tragic as hell for me. And sometimes they could be brutal, but also kind of like heartfelt. And I don't know. I like things that aren't afraid to take 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 those swings.
I love it. And thank you for allowing us as viewers to join that because there are moments where I felt like I was crammed in the back seat and not wanting, needed to get out, but didn't want to necessarily get out. So thanks for taking the time with us today and keep doing what you do because it was a fun ride watching this movie.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. I really am.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks so again.